I'm Reeves Kurtner, and this is In Your Business. Season 1 of In Your Business is presented by Moses out on Mall of Huntington, online at mosesmeansmore.com, and powered by the Huntington Regional Chamber of Commerce and Kindred Communications. In this episode, we explore perception versus reality. We're joined by Jeff Harkins, CEO, and Larry Crum, Director of Marketing and Communications of Woodlands Retirement Community, the multifaceted retirement community that offers a wide range of care from retirement to assisted living to nursing home services. Despite its offerings, Woodlands contends with a misconception of being solely a nursing home, overshadowing its vibrant atmosphere and purpose-driven lifestyle. They even throw Taylor Swift parties. Make sure you listen to that part. Throughout our discussion, we uncover the proactive strategies and initiatives Woodlands employs to challenge these stereotypes, highlighting the enriching experiences and sense of community that define life within the retirement community. Let's get in your business. Jeff, introduce yourself so we can put a voice to the name and your title and all that kind of fun stuff.
Jeff Harkins, and I'm the CEO of Woodlands Retirement Community.
Larry Crum, I'm the Director of Marketing and Communications at Woodlands.
Okay, so let's start with what is Woodlands. Give us an overview of Woodlands Retirement Community and all the range of services that you all provide.
Woodlands is considered a continuing care retirement community, which means there's more than a single level of care provided. We have independent living cottages, we have independent living apartments, and we have assisted living as well. So it's, in other words, people move up there and live their lives quite comfortably. So,
how long has Woodlands been there now? How many years?
Over, 28 years?
Yep.
28.
Sure. How long have you been with Woodlands?
9. Yeah,
Larry, what about you?
10 years.
I've been here for 6 months now.
6 months, yes.
Yes.
Yeah. So, today we want to talk about, like I said, misconceptions and perception versus reality and all that kind of stuff. What are some of the common misconceptions or stereotypes that people have about retirement communities and about Woodlands?
I told Larry, I said, I'll let you talk mostly and I'll throw color in every once in a while. But, I hear a lot of things over the years. So when I first became an administrator in this business over 30 years ago, there's always this negative perception. And it's interesting to me that 30 years later, you still have it, because people don't understand what a retirement community is. They believe it's a South 40, and people just go there and sit and get fed and then go back to their apartments and so on. But that's not the case, and it's especially not the case at Woodlands. Our residents are more active than I am. There are activities going on 7 days a week. They're going somewhere, doing something. Sometimes, occasionally, you're going to have to rest between activities because there's so many. They're traveling a lot because they don't have to worry about their home. It's being protected. It's being taken care of and looked after. And so the biggest misconception, I believe, is that I'm not ready yet because there's nothing. I don't want to go up there. What am I going to do? There's nothing going on. And I would say, and you could correct me if I'm wrong, because you've been there 6 months, and I'm quite certain that he's probably going, wow, this is a lot more active than I thought it was going to be.
Right.
But I would say that's probably the biggest one. Or equally would be, I don't want to give up my independence, which is kind of funny. If those of us that live in houses that are dealing with how do we find somebody to repair this? How do we find, I need help carrying this up the stairs. I need this. I need something taken down to the basement. How am I going to do Christmas decoration? There's a lot of stress and a lot of challenges because we're living at home alone versus living in a community where you don't have to worry about all that stuff.
That's right.
There are people that take care of that for you. If you need something carried, we can do it for you. If you need something hung up, we can do that for you. So I think that would be the other one. You're not giving up independence, you're really gaining more independence.
Are there any specific examples or specific experiences where those misconceptions have come up? Maybe you're talking to a family and they bring up they know that they need to put mom or dad somewhere or whatever it might be. They need these services. Are there any specific stories or examples where you had this conversation with somebody?
Probably the most recent, I've had this with a resident that I knew is an extremely active individual. He and his wife both moved here from out of town to be closer to their children and grandchildren. I asked him, I believe it was in front of Larry, I said, did you ever expect things to be so busy here, or for you to be this busy before you moved here? He said, no, not at all. And he said he was quite amazed. This is an extraordinarily independent and active individual that plays golf and does all these. He had no idea that he was going to be as busy in the community as he is,
right.
And all the activities that he and his wife attend. But probably the most emotional one, we had two recent move-in of a couple, and their daughter said to me in a hallway, Jeff, I was opposed to this. Now that they're here, now that I see how happy they are, now that I see how active they are, she said, I feel bad that I was opposed to it. I believe this is one of the best decisions they could have made.
Do you get that?
That was amazing.
Do you get that? So that's daughter talking about mom and dad or whatever. Do you have that with? On the flip side, mom and dad having a comment, hey, I don't want to go there. I don't want to just sit there. And,
oh, yes.
Yes.
Yes. Now, it's usually, if there are two, there's one that's opposed to it.
Right.
And I think if and this isn't a misconception, but the biggest challenge is I wish I would have moved here sooner. And I get that. I'm not marketing. That's a reality.
Yeah,
they
sure.
realize, my goodness, we could have had all this available to us for all these years.
Yeah.
And we waited till the last minute and moved in and weren't able to take full advantage of the opportunities, all the outings that we have and activities that we have, and the croquet and other things that we do all the time, or walking around the beautiful property. And that's something I hear a lot. And,
sure.
And that is unfortunate. But sometimes, again, if there's one, you want to stay together, and somebody usually wins that battle.
So why do you think these stereotypes exist?
Well, no, I'm one of those people that it's interesting that when I came up here, I didn't know what to expect. I had experience with Woodlands. I had been up there many times, met with many of the residents, but it was new for me as well. Mm-hmm. So a lot of those misconceptions we talked about, the activity and things like that, I kind of experienced firsthand, and kind of seeing how busy everyone stays, how active everyone stays.
Yeah.
We just did February has been Independent Living Month for seniors. And we just did, we talked to some residents about some opportunities, things that they do. And it's not just in the community. There's a lot of events that they go to. A lot of people don't realize that they're out and about on the town. They take trips. We had a group that just went to the Greenbrier. We had a trip that goes to Keeneland in Kentucky.
Sure.
And there's lots of opportunities where we have a partnership with Marshall. They're always going to Marshall athletic events, lectures and anything that's going on. But, I talked to a couple people about that independence, what they're able to do. And they were surprised even, how active that they stayed whenever they were there. And one fun example, we really recently had an event. It was a murder mystery. Our activities director, she had brought some people out to perform, to act out a murder mystery for the residents. It was fun. It was exciting. People enjoyed it. But she went back and she kind of thought, well, how do I make this better? So she met with some residents, and they were like, well, what if we're involved? What if we're more involved? We're more active versus passive. And so she bought a kit, and the residents kind of got their roles, these fun characters that they got to portray. And we had a capacity crowd of residents. We had about a dozen residents that were in costume. They went down to Goodwill to buy their outfits. I mean, they really got into it. They were excited, and they got to actively participate. They weren't just passively sitting there watching a movie or whatever.
Yeah.
They were actively participating in this event while their peers and guests and family were in watching, and we had to open up the doors to allow them all in.
Right.
And it was fun. It was an opportunity to see that you're not just, as Jeff said, you're not just coming up here to sit and watch the wildlife. And if you want to come up there and see the beautiful ponds and the wildlife, that's part of it.
Yes.
But if you want to be active, if you want to, our croquet league, we talked about that. It is competitive.
Right.
It's as competitive as Marshall football.
Right.
They're enjoying that. So there's an opportunity to get out there and just really, to find whatever your niche is, whatever it is that you want to do. We have that for you.
Jeff, why do you think some of those misconceptions exist? Why do you think that the daughter didn't want them to come up there originally?
I think, again, it's the same thing. It's just lack of understanding of what's there. Woodlands has been here for a long time. It's been a big part of the community for a very long time, but there's still a lot of people that haven't been there, and I think that's just the natural, what we don't know we don't understand what we don't know.
That's right.
And I think we just make this perception. And I would like everybody to think about, well, let's look at it in your eyes as an elderly individual. Would you just go somewhere and gather dust? Would you? But I said, these folks are just like you. They're you and I, and we're not going to go just sit down and stare at the wall. We want We want to be entertained. We want to be challenged. We want to learn. We want our brains to continue to do things. And I think until you're there, and I'm not just speaking of Woodlands, but I think until you're at a retirement community, you don't really have a sense. And I think to brag on us, if you walk in, you feel a sense of community immediately, and that's harder to feel in other places. You have neighborhoods now that you don't know half your neighbors these days.
That's right.
Neighbors used to come and support one another, do things together. If your spouse was sick, somebody would stay at your house and watch the kids for as long as they needed to. They didn't even think twice about it.
That's right.
These days, you have to call your mother-in-law that lives 2 hours away and have to wait for them to get there, or whatever the situation is. But the appreciation that Woodland staff have for the residents and the residents have for the staff, and the connection with the staff and the families, I just think there's something that happens there, maybe reminiscent of the old neighborhood that these residents lived in. I could go on that analogy forever, but I think that's probably a big part of it.
Talk about some of before we got started. You talked about your Taylor Swift party. Talk about that, but talk about again some of the other. We've mentioned croquet and travel. What other events and activities take place on a regular basis? I'm sure a Taylor Swift party is not a regular event, but talk about that and some of the other events.
So again, we talked about there's all kinds of activities on and off campus around the area. Marshall's a big part of what we do. There are so many individuals out at the Woodlands that are huge Marshall fans. They're Marshall alumni. So we have a lot of programming that revolves around that as well. We have our Marshall Mondays where professors and different people around campus come out. The president and the Alumni Association's heavily involved. They'll come out and talk to the residents and give updates. And we have lectures and fun things like that. But there are lots of opportunities for expanding. And that's one of the things that I think that Woodlands does so well is, when you really think about this, the senior community, it's a wide range. It's a 55 plus community. So you'll have people in their 60s, in their 70s, their 80s, 90s. We had some people that recently celebrated their 100 plus birthday. Yeah. And when you think about it, a younger audience, you wouldn't market to a 6-year-old the way as a 12-year-old, but they're still labeled, as kids.
That's right.
And it's the same way in the senior community. The activities, the things that you come up with, you have to kind of cater to the different audiences that you have there. And the Taylor Swift party, that's an interesting one because
what do we do here?
So she. Obviously, everyone knows Taylor Swift. The Super Bowl was coming up.
Then the 100-year-old knows Taylor Swift, and so does the 1-year-old.
Exactly.
I was really surprised.
Yes.
Almost doubting what?
Right.
What are we doing?
Well, it was neat because it was like, what can we do to think outside the box? We do a lot of stuff that's on repetition. We have some stuff that you'll see regularly, but there's also a lot of variety thrown in,
right?
To just change things up, provide something new. And this Taylor Swift watch party came about just with the popularity of just let's try something.
Was this around watching a Chiefs game? Watching Super Bowl?
No, this was watching her concert.
Oh, watching the
Eras Tour concert.
Love it.
So what's fun is our gift shop. We sold glasses. We had the sticker tattoos, the 13 tattoos. Yeah. We had T-shirts, all the Taylor Swift shirts, and they were flying off the shelves. Right. And as we got closer, we didn't know. Are we going to have 6 people show up at this? Or are we going to have a dozen people? Well, we had 60 people show up.
60 people came to watch
and
the Taylor Swift show.
They were wearing shirts. We had a couple of employees that brought one of the employees brought their granddaughter, who came up there and belted out a few of the songs.
Love it. But
they're wearing the shirts. They're wearing. They're dressed up.
Yeah.
And one of the things we were talking about earlier, it's kind of funny, is I don't know that a lot of people realize that tour is 3 hours plus long.
Right.
So
yes,
there were some people. The show was 3 hours plus long. So there were some people that were kind of coming and going and doing their thing. But I will say, after 3 hours, there were 6 people that had ridden out the entire 3 hour plus tour.
Right.
Sitting there just taking it all in.
Yeah, that's awesome. That is.
Speaking of that concert. I went out to eat a couple times after that, and at one particular restaurant, my wife was a former teacher of this person that was serving us, and I told her about the Taylor Swift thing that we did, and she was amazed. She's, seriously? That's awesome. And I go, really? I couldn't believe how excited she was. And then we went to another place where my wife recognized the sweatshirts they were wearing were Swiftie sweater thing.
Yeah.
And I told them, and they go, "You've got to be." They were amazed that Woodlands is having Swiftie parties.
Yep.
And yeah, I mean, I still baffled that it was so popular, and that really everybody I talk to thinks it's awesome.
That's great. We've kind of talked about the misconceptions. We've talked about how you really what does make you different and stand out and so forth. But how do you combat that perception that you're just a nursing home, or you just people there just sitting and being fed and all that kind of stuff? How do you overcome that?
Well, again, we're looking at new outlets. We're looking at different ways to get that message out there. We like to bring the residents to share their story, let them voice their own story about, because there's so many people from so many different backgrounds,
right,
and allowing them to tell their own story of what their challenges were, things that they were dealing with, what were their complications as far as what were they challenged with in coming to Woodlands or a community like this, and then kind of finding out what those things were and kind of letting them tell their story about why this was the perfect fit for them.
Sure. Do you have anything else on that you want to add?
Yeah, I think the other really is get people up there.
Get them up there, yeah.
Everybody will tell you the same thing, but until you visit as many places as you possibly can, you won't always feel that almost instantaneous appreciation of this is not what I thought it was going to be. So we encourage the community orientation. We encourage the smiles and laughter and engagement. And they play cards. We have 170 acres, and the property is many thousands of square feet inside. And there are people playing cards at every nook and cranny at different times throughout the entire day, 7 days a week. And I still get amazed by that. I'm walking through the property, and I'm like, you got to be kidding. Here?
Yeah.
And then you go to another hall, and there's another group having a birthday party or something. So it's not just us creating opportunity for activity and interaction. They're doing it in their own neighborhood.
Sure.
And they're playing. They have a card game all the time. Or what do they play that out in front of your place?
Mahjong. They play
okay. I was going to say bridge.
Yeah. Bridge, yes.
And this is. That's funny you say bridge. It's in what we call the bridge, where you go under the building and the driveway to get up to Woodlands. It's right in front of the marketing office.
Okay.
So of all the places that you could play, and there's a lot of them, they play right there in front of the marketing office with a beautiful view out, light windows everywhere and so on. But that's another. That still baffles me, and I've been in the business for a long time. That they still have their life, and they're able to do that. And then, so the other thing is misconception. I'm not going to be doing anything. You're not living next door down the hallway indoors from your neighbors anymore. You can walk in rain, sleet, snow, or shine when the schools are closed, when the power's out, whenever that. We're taking care of you.
Sure.
You're protected, and you've got each other. I didn't even plan to talk about this, but during COVID may have been the best example of the benefits of living in a community like that. Our residents didn't miss a meal. We didn't lay off any employees. We looked at this as a community supporting each other, and we still had activities, limited nature of those, but our employees, instead of delivering in the dining room, would deliver door to door when early on when you weren't really allowed to do much.
That's right.
They delivered ice cream like an ice cream truck would in the neighborhood. And we just gave it out, and I'll tell you, those little things brought tears to people's eyes, because they know they've got family that's stranded at home, and they don't have somebody visiting. They didn't have somebody shopping for them. They couldn't have shop online because they didn't understand how. And that's another thing that we started doing, is shopping, helping people figure out the technology so they can shop online and have groceries delivered.
Perfect. Yeah. COVID and retirement communities and so forth. Man, what a challenging time that was.
It was, but on the upside, it was beautiful
made
because
lemonade out of
we
lemons.
didn't have it. We had it better than people living at home.
Yeah. When you mentioned, like, again, I go back to that one daughter that you brought up, and what kind of conversations do you have with that person to reassure her that this is, what mom and dad need, that this is best for them? Again, combating some of those misconceptions.
It's really funny because I didn't have that conversation with her until after I heard about it. It's like the day after I heard about it from the resident. I met the daughter, and she stopped me in the hall to tell me that. So I didn't have a chance to tell her. But it's usually, I don't really see that much apprehension on the side of the children. If you have 5 or 6 or 7 children, there's going to be some disagreement because that's the nature of
course,
families.
Yeah.
But for the most part, I think our biggest challenge is more convincing the individual
spouse.
that our business is to occupy these apartments, but I wouldn't encourage you to come here if I didn't think you'd enjoy it.
That's right.
And sometimes that can be difficult, but I've got people too that they can't wait to get here.
I get it.
First place in my entire career that I've had people my age tell me, my husband and I, we are absolutely coming there.
Yeah.
We've already determined that.
Yeah.
Who would think ahead of time like that? And they do because their parents lived.
That's right. I've toured the facility probably 7 years ago, 8 years ago. I mean, I was blown away, and I'm not just saying that. I was like, I like this.
Yeah.
I like it. I like doing stuff. I love playing cards. Love it. I do. I love a real deck of cards and playing with humans and so forth. And I like being busy. I like a sense of community and all that kind of stuff. I mean, it really is. You're right. You got to get them there. That's the thing. That's, how do you get them there? Do you have open houses and so forth? Is that how you do that? How do you?
We do. And to your point, a lot of Huntington knows Woodlands. Woodlands is something that is well known in the community. There's a lot of people that have been up there. There's a lot of people that have had family that have lived there. So Woodlands is well known. It's just getting them in the door so they can see what that lifestyle is like. Because it is it's eye-opening whenever you get up there and see what all is involved.
Yes.
So really, we're looking at so many different ways. The open houses, we have big events up there. We're looking to increase what we're doing, bring more people up there, tied to our connection to Marshall, to Huntington.
Right.
Bring people up there for events. Just an opportunity to showcase the community and the things that we're doing.
What approaches do you take in your marketing efforts specifically to portray the reality of life, to show and tell those stories?
Well, like we talked about earlier, just allowing the residents to tell their own stories.
They do testimonials and
we do
all that kind of stuff?
And just because everybody has a little bit of a different testimonial on why that they were hesitant, why this was for them.
Right.
There's a lot of them. One of the other common things that come up often is, what do I do with my stuff? A lot of these people have lived in homes for years, and they've, I'm guilty too. Just lots of stuff.
Yes.
But we work with a couple professionals in the area that are kind of professional right-sizers is what they call it, that kind of work, talk people through what the process looks like, how to pick and choose where what goes, what stays. And then our maintenance team does such a great job working with the residents on, what's going to go where, helping them with, planning and putting things up on the walls, hanging pictures and stuff. And that's one of those testimonials where, there's people that recently moved in that they talked about just that. They had so much stuff, and that was one of their biggest concerns. And once they got there, they were like, it was like a weight had been lifted off their shoulders, because we didn't need all this stuff. We brought our what we really needed.
Yeah, that's right.
And then they're taking full advantage of community life. And what's fun about them is, when I first started 6 months ago, they had come to the community about the same time that I started. And those first couple of days, it was the husband and wife, and they were eating in the dining room and just kind of feeling the place out. And a week later, I saw their table was getting a little bit fuller, and then they'd walk by the marketing office, and they'd have a group with them. And now they are everywhere. They're involved in everything.
Nice.
And that's just it's a beautiful thing to see. Just that sense of community, that opportunity to have a neighborhood of people where you're not stuck in your home. And they talked about having that big home, but they were almost trapped in their home, and now they had an opportunity to come here and be a part of a community, be a part of activities, and just have a life that they wouldn't have had otherwise.
Sure. Jeff, how has this industry, this business changed since you've been in it, since you've been at Woodlands?
It's getting more competitive, but it's also getting more expensive to build. Right now, there are still plenty of people building, but you've got a lot of development folks that want you to build because that's how they make their money.
That's
but
right.
The reality of it is the cost to build a place like this is prohibitive. If we were to say, somebody were to say, we're going to build a Woodlands today, first of all, they wouldn't build it on top of a mountain like we did.
Yeah.
Because it's way too expensive.
Yeah. That's an advantage and a disadvantage.
It is.
Right.
But we're fortunate to have had the opportunity to build that when we did, and now we have arguably one of the most beautiful views of a retirement community that I've ever seen.
Sure.
And so I think that's a big one. The other one, staffing is probably one of the most probably the most complicated thing that people have going on today. We have. I just went through. I don't need to tell the numbers, but our turnover rate is really good, and the longevity is very impressive for a community like this. We still have turnover, but we hire a lot of younger people, and that's one thing on a tangent. We're really lucky that we have youth in the area that are interested in working, willing to work, and so good with our residents. The downside is, we get to know them. They come out of their shell, they graduate from school and they move on, which is to me wonderful. But then it's like, well, good for them.
That's right, yeah.
Then now we've got to break in the next one,
yep.
But that's a fun process too. I think especially for the residents, it's sad when they graduate and they move on.
That's right.
But staffing is a hard one. It's just a never-ending process, and we strive never to lower our standards because you do, and people will meet them. We tend to try to keep our standards high, and just be more patient in getting the right people in the right place. But that's our people are really what defines the quality of Woodlands. Beauty is, anybody can build beauty, anybody can build a building, but it's hard to develop to have the staff.
That's right.
That creates a real long-term environment.
Well, piggyback just briefly on the staffing and the living up on a mountain like we do. We have an absolutely fantastic maintenance team. We have a fantastic housekeeping staff that meets everyone's needs quickly. One of the things that we like to brag about is the fact that whenever there's snow, whenever there's things like that, people are always saying, how do you all get up there? It was a concern that I had.
Yeah, sure.
We're one of the first roads that's plowed. We have people that sometimes our maintenance team will spend the night.
So you'll do it yourself.
They will get out there and they will scrape it. And it's not just the roads, but the sidewalks.
That's right.
The sidewalk all the way around. That heavy snow we had earlier this year was quickly taken care of. And if you wanted to get out in that and make a little trip around the property, you could. But it's just fun to see the pride that everyone takes in making sure that the community is beautiful. And that's part of that maintenance-free living that people get to take advantage of, is that you're no longer mowing your grass and you're no longer the little things that just were a pain in the butt. Now that's taken care of.
Yeah.
And it's taken care of by a lot of people that take a lot of pride and really care about what they're doing.
How many employees do you all have?
We have probably about 140 employees.
And how many residents?
About a little over 280.
So almost, one for every two, right?
Right.
Somewhere around there.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. The most dense number of employees are in assisted living.
That's right.
24-hour, 365 days a year staffed environment. So that's where you get a big chunk of the employees.
Sure. You mentioned like the workers and employees and so forth. I mean, I've done like 25 episodes of this podcast now. It comes up all the time, right? The workers and the turnover and all that kind of stuff. But it's good that you sound like it's not that much of an issue, with you all. So
yeah, I think it's always a challenge, but it's one you can't ever ignore.
No, of course not.
You cannot relax on that, and it's just too much writing on it. And I think many of us know in the places that we go today, that's the most noticeable change. As you go to restaurants, you go to department stores, you go to the mall, you go wherever, it's a different environment.
Yep.
And I would argue that partly because people have lowered the expectations and they're meeting them.
I agree.
Yeah.
Talk about, you mentioned, like, when I asked how this business has changed, talk about the competition. You mentioned that, and how, and I'm assuming here, which could be dangerous, but our population is getting older as well, right? People are living longer. The boomers is the fastest growing population segment, I think. I read that like this morning, where people are living longer and people aren't having kids like they were. How does all that tie in with the competition, and how does that affect your industry?
Well, that's good. I think the cost of construction is I guess a good defense for us, because it's just a hard thing to enter. The other side of that is the demographics. You can build a community anywhere, but it doesn't make sense if the people aren't there to live in it.
That's right.
So this is the tri-state area is a relatively lower populated space relative to the East Coast, West Coast, and other places north of us and south of us. That can be a benefit, not only the smaller town feel and style, but the competition. It's hard. I mean, if you were to build our place today, it would be over 2 to 3 times the cost.
Couldn't imagine
to build it today, and that we went from when we built it, probably even higher than that.
Yeah, easily.
The cost of windows and just the windows and doors has gone through the roof.
Sure.
There's still competition, though, in the sense of smaller communities, smaller spaces, smaller environments. There's more. People don't think about this, but the in-home level of care, in-home services is wonderful in many cases. The downside is if you're getting your in-home care from people well, what happens? Who gets called when they're sick or can't get there in the snow or can't whatever? Those are the things people don't really think about.
No, they don't have they don't have that sense of community. Right, they don't have that.
Their only contact.
It's great that you can stay at your house, but you're not playing cards and bridge and going to Taylor Swift parties and all that kind of stuff.
But I think the home becomes a sense of. If you think about you built.
That's right.
You purchased all these things, and you just hate to let them go, and we forget what's really the most important thing. You can't take any of that with you.
That's right.
But attitude, emotion,
living. Yes.
Yeah. I think, and that's something a retirement community really offers you. That, I mean, I've seen it firsthand many times over the years, personally in my personal life and professional. That's that desire to stay home, that stubbornness to stay home. Can create a lot of challenge. It's a safety issue. Who's going to know you're not up?
That's right.
Who's going to check on you throughout the day? And again, in snow, where's your food coming from?
That's right.
Who's cleaning your clothes? Who's cleaning the house? Who's mowing the lawn? Who's fixing the plumbing? Who's roofing the house? I mean, there's a lot of things that don't make a lot of sense when you're younger.
That's right.
But as you get a little bit older, you start to understand why they're really hesitant to move. But I think we tend to think of, I want my control, but then you're really ultimately not maintaining that control. It's the things around you are controlling you more than you're controlling them.
How do you have residents who like to shovel snow and cut grass and that kind of stuff, right? That's the thing. I like doing that kind of stuff. Do you ever have that issue pop up? This is stuff I like to do, that kind of stuff.
It's really funny you say that. I'm trying to think about anybody that's ever volunteered. I think it depends. When you have 14 inches, nobody volunteers.
No, that's right. Yes.
We have residents that volunteer and do other things, but we try.
They garden. They want that. Little things like that. I'm just saying. Yeah, I enjoy cutting my grass.
Yeah, we had over the years, this resident's passed, but we had a resident that probably worked outside as much as anybody.
That's great.
And she was able to do that every single day.
Yeah.
And when you're planting even the geraniums, so she was planting 150 of those every single year, which were continuing after she's gone. But, I mean, that's a lot. I mean, just think about that. So you're 80 years old, and you're planting 150 geraniums, multiple locations throughout a property that size. Yeah. That's amazing.
That is awesome.
Yeah. But the snow thing, I don't recall a single volunteer. I think that's the one thing people really, at a certain age, you realize that's probably not in my best interest to go step on slippery stuff.
That's right.
Yeah.
Any upcoming initiatives or plans, to further enhance the perception of Woodlands Retirement Community? Anything that you're working on? You say you're working on marketing plans and so forth, but anything else? Anything you want to add to that? Like, this is what we're going to do to.
It's funny you say. Let me tee you up. Larry is my first in-house marketing person in 30 plus years.
Yeah.
We tend to hire this out.
Hire this out with an outside agency.
Outside agency, it could be from wherever USA. Because we tended to pick organizations that knew the industry and whatever. And,
of course.
And sometimes that's good, but in hindsight, that's probably not the best because you think you've got it figured out. But not every community is the same.
No. Not every town is the same.
Yeah, not every state, certainly, most certainly. And Larry's biggest challenge and biggest opportunity now is to how in the world do we show Woodlands to the rest of the world? How do we show, and you can only do that through actual testimonials from residents, live videos of things. So he's creating an environment I'll let him talk about that's going to be as live and a representation of what we can possibly have, as well as our director of activities and other things. And we're trying to intertwine virtually everything so we can real time almost show people what we experience every single day.
Yeah.
So now, Larry, go ahead.
Yeah. Well, just to that point, when you have those outside agencies, they're not here.
No.
They're not here meeting with people. They're coming to the community maybe 4 times a year. They don't know Huntington. They don't know the tri-state area. And that's one of the benefits that we have is that we're living this every day. We're having an opportunity to see that community, to meet with residents and to hear things that are going on in their lives, develop relationships with them. And, taking those relationships and kind of growing what we're doing, in outreach. We're expanding our marketing office. We're building a new marketing office that's going to have an opportunity for us to do some new things. We're buying equipment to be able to do, more testimonials. We're building a brand new website. We're expanding a lot of what we're doing to just reach more people and tell the Woodlands story.
Yeah. Word of mouth is the best form of advertising. It is.
It is. To the point of outside, I don't think you can appreciate Appalachia until you're here.
That's right.
And that's not a negative thing. And it's really hard to say, well, that's not going to work here. To a marketing firm that knows everything about marketing. This has worked in New York. It's worked in Kansas City. It's worked in Dallas.
Yes.
It's like that. It's not going to work here.
Yep.
It's just not going to resonate.
Yep.
And Larry gets that opportunity to now speak for Woodlands himself, where we used to try to convince other people, you might try this. Well, what do we know?
This has been In Your Business. I'm your host, Reeves Kurtner. Thanks to Jeff and Larry for joining us, and thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this podcast, please like, subscribe, share, and even leave us a 5-star review. Season 1 of In Your Business is presented by Moses Auto Mall of Huntington, MosesMeansMore.com, and powered by the Huntington Regional Chamber of Commerce and Kindred Communications.